MazzaOnSports here, back for another episode. Oh, excuse me. Evan Mazza here. Oh, sorry, it's a little late. But Evan Mazza here, back for a new episode of MazzaOnSports. Obviously, got a lot to talk about, a lot to get into today. We'll preview and talk about the AFC and NFC divisional playoff matchups this week. And, of course, we'll talk about everything that has gone on in Major League Baseball throughout the last 48 hours as I tip my cap because, of course, the New York Mets have been in the news over the last 24 hours. The New York Mets were in on Kyle Tucker. They were offering him 4 years, $200 million, high number with multiple opt-outs, high number AAV. The Toronto Blue Jays, of course, were also in on Kyle Tucker with the rumored long-term contract that they were supposedly interested in giving him. But of course, as I said before, as I said last night on the show, just never know about the Los Angeles Dodgers. You just never, ever know about the Los Angeles Dodgers. You can never count them out. As soon as you heard the Los Angeles Dodgers were interested, you knew that they could potentially swoop in and make that deal and sign him. And in the end, as the Mets were waiting a decision, there were reports of them waiting for the decision that would come out. Steve Cohen then made these. I've said it before. I think Steve Cohen needs to stop tweeting. I think he needs to just focus on building a good baseball team, stop tweeting. But he makes these tweets about. I said it yesterday about making the references of how the Pope, right, and how they picked the Pope and everything. And then of course he had to come out later and said, "Hey, I don't know anything. I'm just making a reference to it. Whatever." The reality is, I think Steve Cohen needs to stop tweeting. But as the Mets and the Blue Jays are patiently waiting, and the baseball world was patiently waiting for the best position player available still left on the market, and Kyle Tucker, they got their decision, and it was the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Los Angeles Dodgers, or Kyle Tucker decides to sign with the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Dodgers get another big name player to a 4-year, $240 million contract, $60 million guaranteed for Kyle Tucker. He was a very good player. Obviously, injuries have hurt him over the last few years, but he's still a very good player. And the rich, as they say, get richer. The Dodgers improve their team drastically. It goes back to, again, right? The Dodgers' willingness to spend and the Dodgers having this money to go and spend. You can thank the Shohei Ohtani contract because they got $68 million in deferred money because of that contract, because Shohei Ohtani, the best player in all of baseball, is only making $2 million. And the team gets all that money back of $68 million. But because of these contracts like this with the deferred money, they're able to make these kind of signings and make these kind of deals, and they get another big name player, just like they did get with Edwin Diaz. They got the Los Angeles Dodgers got the best, probably pitcher overall on the market. The best, not just the best reliever, the best pitcher, I think, overall on the market, Edwin Diaz. And then they get the best position player on the market in Kyle Tucker. They get the best position player on the market. And now you get to insert him into left field, and you put him in a lineup with Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman and Ohtani and Teoscar Hernandez and Will Smith and Andy Pages and Tommy Edman. Like, you look at, someone made a good point that usually lineup 6 through 9 isn't really that deep, right? Usually lineup 6, it's usually the top 5 or so of the order. That's like the best part. The Dodgers are the one team in baseball where their 1 through 9 is fantastic all the way through. There's not a single spot in that lineup, legit, where it's like, well, okay, yeah, there's a spot where we can get an out. No, everyone is a tough out. And now you add Kyle Tucker, and you have Mookie, you have Shohei, Mookie, Freddie, Kyle, Teoscar. That's your 5. Will Smith is a darn good catcher. Andy Pages, Tommy Edman. This is just a team that is front-loaded with talent on offense. It's going to score a ton of runs. You add up their bullpen now with Diaz as the closer. They still have a good starting rotation, even though their rotations has been banged up with injuries and look, last year they pretty much won without really much of a rotation, the World Series, aside from Yamamoto, who carried them really to the World Series, both out of the rotation and in the bullpen in Game 7. But the rich get richer, and they get Kyle Tucker to a 4-year, $240 million contract. He'll get $30 million in deferrals. The contract does have opt-outs after the second and third years, so I could see him opting out after those first 2 years to get a bigger contract. $64 million signing bonus, which lowers the present day value of the contract to $57.1 million per year. The Dodgers have not yet officially announced signing, but of course, it's been reported all around. Kyle Tucker is the richest contract AAV in Major League Baseball history. That is over Juan Soto. It is actually over Juan Soto by 0.1. 57.1. Juan Soto was 51 million, so not 0.1, excuse me. Juan Soto, 51 million. Kyle Tucker, 57.1 million for Kyle Tucker. So the Dodgers get another huge bat. They get another big player, even though they didn't need it. They don't need it. They don't need Kyle Tucker, but they get him anyway because Andrew Friedman, their GM, what's the quote that he always says? If you think like a third place team, or if you think like a third place team for agency, you're going to get third place players or something like that. I'm something like that. Let me get the full quote out for you, but you get my drift. But that's the philosophy that Andrew Friedman follows. That's the philosophy he follows. Full quote: If you're rational in every free agent, you're going to finish third for every free agent. And they follow that mantra to a T. They don't look at it and go, I don't know. No, they go, well, we like that player, we'll sign him. And it's because they have the flexibility to do so. And to top it off, players want to come to Los Angeles. And we may call it ring chasing. We may call it, going getting a ring and cheap, the cheap way out. But these players, these athletes, they're not in it to play a long-term game and everything right nowadays. Nowadays, it's like, let's get a ring now. Let's get a championship now. Why wait? Let's get a championship. Let's win a championship. That's what these athletes think nowadays. It's not about they're already making the money. They're already getting the money. The money is fine. They'll make their money, but it's like, I want to win while I'm getting paid. Athletes see Mike Trout with the Angels and they go, I don't want to be like Mike Trout, be the best player in the world and not win anything. They don't want to be that guy. They want to go out and win championships while they're getting paid. Doesn't matter where they are or who they're playing for. They want to win championships. Edwin Diaz left the Mets when the Mets really wanted him, and he's like, I want to go win a title. What are you going to do? What are you going to do if you're the Mets and someone has that mantra of, I want to go win a championship to the Dodgers. They're the best team in baseball. I want to go win there. Kyle Tucker's probably thinking the same thing. I could take a 4-year deal with deferral, with opt-outs with the Mets, or I could take a 4-year deal with the Dodgers, get paid more money, and probably win a championship while I'm there. Because if I go to the Mets, I'm going to be chasing the Dodgers. So I might as well join the Dodgers and get paid and be the highest paid guy AAV-wise and win a championship while I'm at it, instead of going to the Blue Jays in a long-term deal and losing the World Series of the Dodgers again, or go to the Mets and possibly lose in the playoffs or not even make the playoffs. Who knows with the Mets? Who knows? But either way, I'm chasing the Dodgers. So Kyle Tucker decides to go to the Dodgers. And the Dodgers are like, well, we now have a big bat in the middle of our order. We can now add Kyle Tucker, to Freddie, Ohtani, Betts, Teoscar, Will Smith, Andy Pages, etc., Tommy Edman, Will Smith. They can add to these guys. They add to these guys. Now their lineup is more complete than it already was. It already was the best lineup in baseball. Now it gets better. So the Dodgers, like I said yesterday, don't count them out. They weren't really in it as much in terms of the reports. They weren't really in it that much in terms of the reports for Kyle Tucker. Like, you knew they were interested. There were the reports that they were interested, but you didn't hear about them offering anything. It was always the Mets and the Blue Jays. But then they came in and said, we'll top the Mets offer. We'll top the Mets offer. And Kyle Tucker said, I'm in. So But Kyle Tucker is now a Los Angeles Dodger. The best team in baseball gets better, and sadly, we do go a step closer to a strike, or not really a strike, a lockout. Because let's be real. The more the Dodgers keep doing this, the more likely we're going to have a lockout. This is not a player's strike or anything like that. This is an owner's strike or an owner's lockout that we're going to be coming into after this season. And it's going to be about the money, payroll, the possibility of a salary cap, teams look like the Dodgers, like the Mets, like the Phillies, like the Cubs or the Yankees, the Red Sox that are able to pay and get quality players, while teams like the Dodgers while teams like the Pirates and the Rockies or the A's, of course, struggle to make money and put a competitive team on the field. Now, look, part of it is their own fault, but obviously they're not going to look at it that way. They go, look, we can't obviously compete with the Dodgers or the Mets or the Phillies or the Red Sox or the Yankees or et cetera, or the Cubs, and look, that's true. They can't compete with them. That is true. The Marlins also, like, they can't compete with these other teams. Like, it's true. They can't compete with them in terms of payroll. So you see the Dodgers making another move like this, and they get Kyle Tucker. It's like, we're definitely not going to have baseball next year in 2027. So enjoy baseball while you have it in 2026, because we might not get it in 2027 due to this due to this possible lockout that might be coming with the CBA and everything. And the Dodgers making the moves they're making certainly brings us unfortunately a few steps closer to it. But if you're a Dodgers fan, if you're a Dodgers fan, you're like, well, let's just win a World Series. If you're a Dodgers fan, shoot, let's just get a three-peat. Let's get a three-peat, right? If you're a Dodgers fan, you're like, we're the best. We got 3 World Series championships in the last 6 years. We've won back-to-back. We're going for back-to-back-to-back. We have as good a chance as any since the 98 to 2000 Yankees to win their 3rd title in a row. So it's like, let's win a 3rd championship in a row if we're going to go on, if there's going to be a lockout. But that is the status around the Dodgers in baseball right now. But as coming into the 2026 season, as we're only a month away into spring training, the rich get richer, the best team in baseball gets a heck of a lot better with Kyle Tucker. Was it a slight overpay? Yeah, maybe $60 million a year for a guy who's been hurt. Sure, but he's still a darn good hitter, and he can hit, and he's got good OPS, good everything. He's a good player, and he can steal bases. He's a good player. So, like I said, the best team in baseball gets the best position player available on the market. So, fast forward to the Mets, and really also has something to do with the Blue Jays too, because of the next player we're going to talk about. You fast forward to the Mets, and you turn your attention to the Mets, and that's another player we didn't get. That's another player that spurned us for the Dodgers, Edwin Diaz being the other one. And we're still in need of a big bat. We lose out on Kyle Tucker. I'm speaking in terms of the Mets. They lose out on Kyle Tucker. They still have a hole in the outfield. They need a bat in the middle of that order. And you don't really know exactly where to go, because it's like, well, Cody Bellinger, you could pivot to Cody Bellinger, but Cody Bellinger, obviously, it seems to me with Bellinger that him and the Yankees are just trying to work things out, trying to find a middle ground. Their contract talks because like they really are a good fit for each other, Bellinger and the Yankees. But then, of course, there's Bo Bichette. Now, Bo Bichette, we haven't heard much of anything about the Mets with Bichette. And the reports with Bichette was the Phillies. And Bob Nightingale said that the Phillies had a 7-year deal for Bichette. And the reports were that it seemed like he was going to be heading to Philadelphia. Well, then the Mets came in, and out of nowhere, with no reported interest whatsoever, because this is what the Mets do. And I think a lot of people still, especially Met fans, still need to kind of get used to this. The Mets are not really a team that leaks anything anymore. Sure, if there's a big name play like Soto or Tucker, we're going to find out about it. But, there's a lot of other instances where it's like, especially over the last several years, like, oh, wow, the Mets are involved in this. The Mets are in this. Oh, okay. the Mets were in this race or they signed this player. Oh, that was kind of out of nowhere. They've done a good job not leaking things. Like, we really didn't know about Bo Bichette and the Mets being linked. But earlier today, this afternoon, the Mets and Bo Bichette agreed to a contract. It is a 3-year contract. So Bo Bichette is heading to New York with the Mets, and it is a 3-year contract, $126 million with opt-outs after the first 2 years. So again, there's still the whole thing with Bichette could leave after a couple of years and he signs it and he goes somewhere else or whatever. But the Mets swooped right in after everyone was saying the Phillies were the big favorites to sign him. After everyone saying the Phillies were the biggest favorites to sign him, the Mets came right in, gave him a big contract for a short year deal, but with big money. And now they get Bo Bichette and they add that big bat in the middle of the order, but they also add to what is now pretty much a log jam in the infield, because the big reaction for me, and I'm sure a lot of other Met fans, was, wow, we got Bo Bichette? Wow. Where do we play him? It's like, where do we play him? Because Lindor's at short. Okay. Well, we're certainly not going to play him at first base, and Jorge Polanco seems to be the slated first baseman. Okay. Well, and I'll play him at second. That's Bichette's best spot. Bichette's the second baseman, and Marcus Semien was acquired. So, and the whole thing was for Lindor. Now, that was an interesting one when you think about it, too, because I didn't realize it until I saw a clip post up on that someone reposted or show, because it reminded me, like, oh, that's right, Bo Bichette was teammates of Marcus Semien in Toronto. And I didn't think about that. I was like, oh, wow, the Bo Bichette and now Marcus Semien are going to be reunited together. So that's pretty cool. But Semien was on second base. Lindor's obviously at short. Where do they put Bichette? And then you see the reports come out that the Mets scenario for Bichette, the Mets idea, is for him to play third base. He's going to start at third base, a position he has not played before ever in the major league level. And it's, again, a very similar thing to what we're seeing with Jorge Polanco, where the rumors is he's going to play first base in a position where he hasn't played before. So the Mets add good bats. Polanco's a good bat who can hit home runs. Bichette's a good bat who batted 294 last year, 293, 294 last year. Good slugger, can hit for power, hit doubles, extra base hits. Overall, good hitter. So they get good bats, and Semien's can be a good bat too. I know everyone's down on Semien's bat, and obviously the Mets his age is a factor. The Mets obviously got him too for his defense and his presence in the locker room and the clubhouse. But Semien a couple of years ago, not so long ago, hit 20 home runs. If we can give the Mets 20 home runs, I think that would be a success right there. So don't count on Semien. I've said it before, but I wouldn't count on Semien's bat. But again, it adds to that uncertainty of, can this work? Bichette's at third, Polanco's now at first. So you get good bats, but you're placing them in positions where it's like they haven't played before. And the Mets, obviously, their whole thing in the offseason was, well, we got to get better defensively. And look, they do, because last year the infield defense was a problem. I said it before, the infield defense last year was a problem. It wasn't very good. But now you're putting two guys in that have not played certain positions. Now you're hoping it works out. So, but then, of course, that adds to the other thing. Adds to the other thing. There's this huge logjam now in the infield. Beatty is now out. So Brett Beatty is now no longer the starting third. Like, we all thought Beatty was going to be the starting third baseman next season. We all thought in 2026, after a pretty good year in 2025, after a bad start, but he did really well to recover from that bad start, and he ended up having a good season, Brett Beatty, and he played very good defense at third base, and he gave the Mets some stability at third base after Mark Vientos really struggled. But Beatty is now out as the starting third baseman, and now you're seeing reports and rumors of, well, the Mets see they can use him at second, utility, third, outfield, and left field, which he played 20 plus games in the minor leagues of left field. I just don't see the Mets placing Beatty in left field when he's just so inexperienced. But then again, we'll see. Will Beatty be the utility player? Will Beatty be like their big utility player? I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. But you also factor in Mark Vientos. What does that mean for him? Will they give Mark Vientos a chance to compete for the DH spot? because now he ain't obviously going to play third base. Bo Bichette's now here. Brett Beatty is now out of third. Could he get a chance to play DH? I don't know. I think the Mets rather he play in the field than be stuck as a DH. But you got Beatty, you got Vientos, you got Mauricio, you got Acuna, you got Jet Williams, who's coming up in the minor leagues, even Ryan Clifford. This is a log jam at the infield position. This is a log jam here, and so yeah, you got options for. Obviously, you need some quality bench players, but it's also like you also need pitching. And that's the biggest thing I think the move that I think the Mets will make next. They need pitching. They still need a starter. And I still think they need another reliever in the bullpen, but they certainly need a starter. And I think the Mets could certainly use one of these infielders, maybe Brett Beatty, to parlay that into a trade for a starting pitcher. Obviously, there's been reports about them being interested in Freddie Peralta. The Yankees, of course, are another team very much interested in Freddie Peralta. Framber Valdez is still out there in free agency. Yeah. But the Mets still need pitching. This is a good addition. I'm not, again, all in all, this is a very good addition for the Mets to get Bo Bichette, and he gives them a good presence now in the lineup with Soto, Lindor, Polanco, Simeon, Alvarez, and possibly even Carson Benj. And that's another thing. They still need to add to the outfield, but possibly Carson Benj if he's playing. So he adds that middle part of the order that could help a lot, or even the top of the order if the Mets choose to place him there. But definitely, certainly in the middle of the order, and he's a really good bat. But again, it adds to the defensive situation, and it adds to this infield crowded area that the Mets find themselves in. So the Mets are going to have to work this out. Where do they see Brett Beatty? Where do they see Mark Vientos? Where do they see Ronnie Mauricio? Luis Angel Acuna is having a really good winter ball right now, but where do they see him? Jet Williams is coming up from the minor leagues. Where do they see him? So this is a team that is going to have to work things out and find out, and evaluate the infield position, because obviously you got your infield now. The infield is set. The infield is now set. It's going to be Jorge Polanco at first. It's going to be Marcus Simeon at second. And I do think Polanco will play some DH too. But Polanco at first, mainly, it looks like. Simeon at second, Lindor at short, Bo Bichette at third, with, of course, Alvarez as the catcher. So the infield is set for the Mets. The diamond is set for the Mets. At least that's what it looks like. But again, you still got big names. You still got some names out there that you need to find a spot for on the team, or you can probably look at to say, okay, should we trade one of these guys in the package for a pitcher or something like that? And of course you still have DH you have to figure out. Does Mark Vientos get a chance to DH? So it adds a variety of flexibility and options, and certainly flexibility getting Bo Bichette that the Mets can certainly look at. And reports were from Pat Ragazzo from Sports Illustrated that the Mets are still in it for Cody Bellinger. Now, again, I think in the end, he's going to be a Yankee. I think in the end, Bellinger will be a New York Yankee. I just think them and the Yankees they're too much of a good fit for each other. And I think Bellinger just fits Yankee Stadium better than he would fit Citi Field. I think like it's going to be between that. I think it's just him and the Yankees just trying to work things out and figure out where the common ground is with their contract. But look, if the Mets could sign Bellinger, certainly that adds more to their outfield. You can put him at left field. You can put him at DH or first base. But again, I'm not sure if the Mets are really going to sign Bellinger. What I think the Mets' next move is going to be, or at least should be, is pitching. They need pitching. They still need a starter. Right now, your starting rotation is Nolan McLean, Clay Holmes, Kodai Senga, who's still here, obviously. I thought he'd be traded by now, but he's still here. David Peterson, and Sean Manaea. And with Peterson, you're hoping that, he can be better than he was in August, September. Senga, you're just hoping he can stay healthy. Clay Holmes, you're hoping he can continue the season he had a year ago. He had a pretty good year. Nolan McLean, you're hoping he can carry over a pretty solid rookie year as he enters. Well, this will be really his rookie year, but you can hope he can carry over the performance he showed last year when he came up. Sean Manaea, if he can just, again, with Manaea, it's health. With Manaea and Senga, it's health. With Holmes, it's carried over what he did a year ago. With Peterson, it's be more of what he was in the first 4 months, not the last 2 months. With McLean, it's hoping he can put up a good rookie year, and there's a lot of expectations for McLean. And of course, there's Sproat, and then there's Tong, and then there's still Christian Scott, who's going to be back. I'm sure he'll be competing for a spot or so as the year goes on. So, but still, there is a lot of questions in the starting rotation. The Mets need a starter. And there's, I think, still a question in the bullpen. I think the Mets need to find one more guy in that bullpen to really even things out there and to really get more of an arm there. But so I still, and of course there's the outfield. But again, the Mets getting Bo Bichette is a good add. And it's also a good morale thing. I'm not one of those fans that is saying, oh man, this offseason, the Mets haven't done anything. It's been a terrible offseason. They lost this guy. They haven't gotten anybody. I'm not one of those. The Mets have certainly made additions. Like I said, the Simeons, Polanco's, the Weavers, the Devin Williamses. It's just the guys that are not here for the Mets have unfortunately outweighed the new guys coming in. And look, I guess you can understand, right? It's Edwin Diaz, it's Pete Alonso, it's Brandon Nimmo, it's Jeff McNeil, even guys that have been here for a long time, and guys who were beloved Mets, especially for Pete Alonso. Alonso is one of the most beloved Mets in the last 15 or so years since David Wright or Jacob deGrom. But the Mets have made additions, and I never saw this season as punting. A lot of people thought this was a punt year for the Mets. I didn't think so. I just think this is a team that clearly needs to look at other things because they've been trying the same thing since 2017, 18, 19, and it just hasn't been working. So So David Stearns is now here. He's implementing his own vision of the team, and he's going to try to win with his own vision. I don't think the Mets were punting, and clearly the moves they made and now signing Bo Bichette definitely tells me they're not trying to punt. They're certainly trying to compete and trying to win. Look, they had the same team a year ago that, with the players that they had before, and they only won 83 games and they collapsed in the second half of the season. So again, they're evaluating the team, they're evaluating certain players, they're evaluating where they want to go and what they want to try and what they want to, what the players want to be, and they're evaluating the team. And I'll tell you one thing that I think is one thing that does make me optimistic about the Mets and of the additions that they've made. And this is a good stat. This is a good stat. Now, you may say, what was the biggest problem? When I ask you what was the biggest problem with the New York Mets last year, you'll say the starting pitching. Fair enough. The Mets starting pitching in the second half of the season was, didn't play well. It didn't. There was no, aside from Nolan McLean, no Mets starting pitcher, and Clay Holmes. Aside from Nolan McLean and Clay Holmes, no Mets starting pitcher was good in the second half. David Pearson really struggled. Kodai Senga really struggled. Shalman I really struggled. Brandon Sproat had inconsistencies. Jonah Tong really struggled. So aside from Clay Holmes and Nolan McLean, the starting rotation really struggled down the second half of the season, especially guys like Peterson and Senga and Manaea. Well, what was the other thing they really struggled in? The other thing they really struggled in was runners in scoring position. Aside from Juan Soto and Lindor and Alonso, the Mets were not a very good team running scoring position last year. They really weren't. This was one of the worst teams in baseball running scoring position. It's to me the biggest reason why they were 0 for 65 or whatever they were, down by a run or so in the eighth inning. They couldn't score with the runners in scoring position. If they had a man on third with less than 2 outs, that guy wasn't coming in to score. Whether it was the approach at the plate, or I took it as their approach at the plate and their coaching. It didn't look good at all, their approach at the plate last year. Well, the guys they've added, Simeon, Polanco, and now Bichette, the one thing that they each had in common last season, they were good in runners scoring position. Marcus Simeon batted .265 with 44 RBIs. Pretty good. Solid. Jorge Polanco batted .337, 985 OPS, and 52 RBIs. That's really good. And Bo Bichette, .381, 1.053 OPS, and 80 RBIs. That's really, really, really good. So 3 guys, Simeon, Polanco, Bichette, all last year, did pretty solidly, did pretty well, did good with runners in scoring position last year. And I think that's because, you know what it is? These guys are contact guys. Polanco's more of Polanco is a power guy, certainly, but these guys are contact guys. Brandon Nimmo, I don't mean to rag on the guys that the Mets, traded or let go in free agency, but Alonso was a guy who would hit for power. That was his game. He hit for power. But he would also strike out a lot. Brandon Nimmo, he used to be a contact guy. He used to be a guy who would draw walks and work the count, but now he's a power guy. Now he doesn't really draw his walks anymore. He strikes out a lot. Jeff McNeil has not been the batting title guy that he was 3 years ago. These are contact guys. Simeon, Polanco, Bichette, they all put the ball in play. So hopefully they can carry over what they did last season for their respective teams, the Blue Jays, the Mariners, and the Rangers, and carry over and help this team with runners in scoring position, because that was the biggest thing about this offense. They didn't score with runners in scoring position. They didn't score with runners in scoring position. Aside from a couple of guys like Soto and Alonso, and even, and Lindor, they couldn't score with runners in scoring position. They really struggle with that aspect of the game. So if you're the Mets, I can see what David Stearns is looking at when it comes to this offseason. He's looking at contact and he's looking at defense. Hopefully the contact is there this season and they can score more runs around the scoring position, because if they can do that, that's huge. We'll see about the defense, because again, there's still those questions about Polanco at first and Bichette at third, and haven't played there. So we'll see come spring training. But I think that this is a big ad for the Mets, a big move for the Mets, and a very good job by the Mets to pivot quickly. And after losing out on Kyle Tucker and going to Bo Bichette, they met with him during the winter meetings and everything. So obviously there was interest from the get-go, from the beginning. So, we found that out just today, right after they signed him, that they've met with him in the winter meetings. But this is a good get for the Mets, a good ad for the Mets. He adds a lot to their lineup and can give them some power and slugging and doubles and such. So he's a good all-around player. And I think this is a good move for the Mets. Now, the next move, I think, needs to be starting pitching. Next move needs to be a starting pitcher. They need to find a starter. So, and like I said, another reliever in the bullpen also could really help. Outfield, we'll see. Right now, it's Soto and Carson Bench and Tyrone Taylor. So, obviously Bench is a rookie. He's a young kid. They drafted him in 2024. They're very, very, very high on him. So there'll be some high expectations with him if he's the starter opening day. And of course, then there's Tyrone Taylor, who great defender, but his hitting leaves a lot to be desired. So he's better off, Tyrone Taylor, as a fourth outfielder. But right now he's slated to be the starter. So right now, if the season began today, he'd be the starter. But we'll see. They need to add another outfielder, but they certainly need to add another starter. And I also think they still need to add another reliever. But the Mets get Bo Bichette, and the Philadelphia Phillies, after not being able to get Bo Bichette, they pivot and actually re-sign JT Realmuto. So Realmuto is brought back to the Phillies. I think that's a good re-signing. I know there was questions about whether the Phillies are going to bring him back, and I know Realmuto is getting older and everything, but Realmuto is still a good player, and he's a good Philly for the team. Good guy in the locker room that the Phillies like to have. Good player. So, and he's re-signed with the Phillies for a 3-year, $45 million contract, and the Phillies get their starting catcher back. So, I think that one made sense. It made sense for the Phillies to get JT Realmuto back, but a lot of movement going around in baseball. There's still a lot more movement to be left. There's still the Cody Bellingers and the Framber Valdez's. Freddie Peralta is still available for a trade. Who knows about Jarren Duran with the Red Sox? Maybe even guys like Lars Nootbaar and such. So there's still a lot of activity going to go on in Major League Baseball until spring training, or from now until opening day. So, but the Mets make a big move with Bo Bichette. The Dodgers make a big move with Kyle Tucker, and with a month left before the start of pitchers and catchers reporting. So, from Major League Baseball to the NFL Divisional Round is starting tomorrow with the games of the Buffalo Bills and the Denver Broncos at 4:30, and then the 49ers and Seahawks at 8 o'clock. Sunday, Texans Patriots at 3 o'clock. Rams Bears at 6:30. To start this pick them off, I'm going to pick the Buffalo Bills to upset the Denver Broncos. I know the Broncos have the best defense. The Broncos come into this game as 1.5 favorites. So it's very much even in terms of the favorites, very much even. But I just think the Broncos, I don't know if they have enough offense. I just don't know if they have enough offense to compete with the Bills. I don't really like the Bills defense that much, but I think I like the Broncos offense less. And while the Broncos defense is really good, Josh Allen is Josh Allen. I just think this will be a game that's going to come down to which quarterback is going to make the big play. I like Bo Nix a lot. I just think Josh Allen's going to make the big play in Denver as the experienced veteran quarterback. Bo has obviously been in the playoffs. It's the second year in a row in the playoffs, first home playoff game. But I just think that actually it's a rematch from a year ago in Buffalo. But the Bills, I just think the Bills are too much for the Broncos. I think Josh Allen's going to be too much for the Broncos defense, even though they're a good pass rush. But I just think Allen's just going to make that one big play, and the Bills will win a close one, somewhere around 26-20 or something like that, I think, 27-20. I just think the Bills will be able to pull out a win and advance to the AFC Championship game. So I got the Bills against Denver on Saturday. From 49ers, Seahawks. Seahawks are 7-point favorites at home. Boy, that's a pretty big number for facing your – I mean, think about it. This is the third matchup between them. And the Seahawks are 7-point favorites. Man, that's a little disrespectful to the 49ers. I know they don't have George Kittle. I know they don't have Fred Warner, but that is pretty darn disrespectful to the Seahawks, to the 49ers. This is the third time Kyle Shanahan gets to see Sam Darnold. This is the third time Kyle Shanahan gets to see that defense. I think he's going to have a game plan ready to go and ready to play against that really good Seahawk defense and against Sam Darnold. And the Seahawk offense, that can kind of be up and down. That is, you don't really know what you're going to get sometimes. Darnold's had a good year, but they don't really have much of a running game. Darnold's obviously had trouble with turnovers. Again, they're very conservative. I think sometimes way too conservative on offense in this game. So far this season. So I could see San Francisco going into Seattle and pulling off it looks like a big upset. I mean, 7-point favorites. That's a pretty big upset, right? Or at least a decent upset. I do think Seattle wins this game. I think the injuries that San Francisco has is just too much. I think the injuries they have is too much. No Fred Warner, no Kittle, no Bosa. I just think it's too much. I think the Niners will compete. They'll battle. They'll put up a good game against the Seahawks, but I think the Seahawks defense will be too much for them. I think Sam Darnold will make the plays to Jackson, the Jigba, and their receiving core. Seattle, whether or not they get some out of the running game, we'll have to find out. But you can run the football on the 49ers. I think we've seen that. But I think the Seahawks will squeak out a win. I'll say 20-17, some 17-13 maybe. But it'll be a tough physical game. This is the third time they've met. San Francisco did beat Seattle all the way back in week 1. Like I said, that was back in week 1, but they did beat them in Seattle. I think Shanahan will have a game plan ready to put out the best game he can with an injured team against a really good Seattle team. But I think Seattle's just going to be too much, especially on defense. And I think Darnold will make a big throw here or there to Jackson and Jigba that will define this game. That'll be a big part of this game. Cooper Kupp even too. This is why they brought in Cooper Kupp. They brought in Cooper Kupp for games like this. So I think Cooper Kupp can make a couple of big catches in this game. So I'm going to pick the Seattle Seahawks to win and advance to the NFC Championship game. Be their first NFC Championship game probably since 2014, right? I think their first, I think this would be their first NFC Championship game appearance if they were to win since the 2014 championship when they beat Green Bay. And they would host the NFC Championship game just like they hosted that one in Green Bay. On to Sunday's action. Texans, Patriots. Patriots are 3-point favorites. I love the Texans defense. I think this will be an interesting game because the Texans defense will face the Patriots offense is going to face a defense they have not faced before. I love their defense, Houston, and I think they're going to give Drake May fits because he has not faced a defense like this all year long. The Patriots offense has not faced a defense like this all year long, or offense has not faced a defense like this all year long. I think the Texans defense will give the Patriots offense fits. But I think the Patriots win because the Texans offense will not have Nico Collins in this game. So I think not having Nico Collins due to the concussion is going to be the big factor in this one. I just don't know about Houston's offense. I think New England's defense will hold the Patriots offense. New England's offense is just a little bit better, is better than Houston's offense. So I think they'll make at least one more or so big play. I think it's going to be a close defensive battle. I'll pick the Patriots. Let's go 16-10, something like that. It's going to be a close defensive football game, 13-10 even. But I think the Patriots win this one. But I do think the Texans defense will give Drake May fits in this one. But I will pick the Patriots, which means I got Patriots Bills AFC Championship game in Foxborough Patriots Bills for the third time this season. The Bills, obviously, in last time in New England came back and had that big comeback victory against them. So I got the Bills and the Patriots in the AFC Championship game. Now, who will meet the Seattle Seahawks in the NFC Championship game? I'm going to pick between the Rams and the Bears. I'm going to pick the Bears. It's going to be a really Chicago weather day in Soldier Field in Chicago on Sunday night. Let's just check the weather. It's supposed to be 18 degrees, rain, a lot of wind. It's going to be a Chicago kind of night on Sunday night. And I just don't think the Rams are going to be up to it. I think Sean McVay will have his team ready to play, but I just think I don't know if they're going to be up to it. I just think this has got Bears all the way. I think the Bears, again, they're just, like I said yesterday, I just think they're on this magic ride, and they're just going to wave that magic ride to the NFC Championship game. So I'm going to pick the Chicago Bears in this one. I'll say 27-16. I think the Bears will make a couple of big plays on offense. Caleb Williams will do what he's been doing, make some big plays outside the pocket. I think that the running game will be fine against for the Bears against the Rams defense. I think the Bears defense, while may give up a lot of yards, I think they'll get a couple of turnovers on Stafford and the Rams offense. And I think the Bears will win, and they'll advance to the NFC Championship game against the Seattle Seahawks. So I got the Bears and the Seahawks and the Bills and the Patriots in the championship games, or winning this weekend, heading to the championship games. But it should be a fun weekend of the divisional playoffs as we get closer and closer to the Super Bowl in San Francisco. But it should be a fun weekend this weekend. In wrestling, last night was the TNA debut on AMC. Look, it was fun to see Cora Jade. That was cool. It was cool to see Sonya Deville. Obviously, they weren't able to have some of their talent available for this show because of some visa issues overseas. So that was kind of a bummer, especially when you consider that this was their big debut show on AMC. So like it would have been great to have more of your stars, but they weren't able to. But you saw the Iconics drop their women's tag team championships, which was very interesting because they are now free agents. I keep calling, they're not called the Iconics anymore, but they'll forever be the Billy Kay and Peyton Royce will forever be the Iconics to me. But they're now free agents, and I'll tell you what, if they don't re-sign with TNA, they look really good with AEW and they look really good with WWE. They're great. So, but we saw the debuts of Cora Jade, we saw the debuts of Sonya Deville, and the big one, and Sonya Deville as a GM figure, just like where she was before in WWE television. AJ Styles kicked off the show, and later on he went to Frankie Kazarian and talked about winning the TNA World Championship. And then later on in the show, we also saw the return of Dixie Carter, and Dixie Carter got booed. So yeah, after all these years, there is no nostalgia for Dixie Carter. There is no like, oh, wow, the Dixie era was actually good kind of thing. No, TNA fans in Dallas, Texas, at least, still do not like Dixie Carter. She was booed. Bully Ray Dudley then kind of came in to he was on commentary for the main event between Mike Santana and Frankie Kazarian. Bully Ray was able to kind of get more of the cheers back because he's Bubba Ray, Bully Ray Dudley. And Mike Santana, in a pretty good match, wins back the TNA World Championship for the second time, but he will now defend the title tomorrow night against Frankie Kazarian with re-signee Nick Nemeth, a.k.a. Dolph Ziggler. But Nick Nemeth re-signed with the company. That was the big breaking news yesterday, earlier in the day before the show started, that Nick Nemeth had signed a contract extension with the company. So he's going to be around for a little while longer with the company at least. And he will special guest referee the match at TNA Genesis tomorrow night. So actually, let's go through the card for Genesis, or as Santino Morello said yesterday on the show, Genesis. I love Santino. But we have Ryan Nemeth versus Mara Sade. We have Cedric Alexander versus Moose versus Joe Hendry. We have AJ Francis versus Rich Swann. Elijah versus Mustafa Ali. The Hardy Boys versus the Righteous. Li Ying Lee against Zarya. Mike Santana versus Frankie Kazarian, and JDC versus Eddie Edwards. Obviously, this will be the retirement match of JDC, aka Fandango. So, and he faces Eddie Edwards in a retirement match. But should be an interesting pay-per-view. But again, the show itself last night, not the best shows I think you want if you're TNA, because you're trying to make a big impact. You're trying to make a big impact or a big splash on television. And it's the first time in a long time they've really been on television at a big slot like this. First time in a long time. So, because they've been back and forth and back and forth, back and forth between all these other networks and television stations, and not on exactly the best spots, best time slots, but they finally got a good one. So you don't really like to see, you'd like to see a better, you'd like to see a better showing than this. So you'd like to see a better showing than this from TNA. But again, it kind of an okay show that they had yesterday. Not the best, but certainly okay. I'm actually looking up the ratings. Let's see. Did the TV ratings come out for the show yesterday? I don't think so. So the ratings for the show, I'm not going to go through the ratings for every TNA Impact show on NAMC. I just wanted to see if the ratings came out, but no, they didn't. SmackDown, on to SmackDown. SmackDown was tonight or earlier today in London, and Drew McIntyre came out to begin the show. He got a promo. He was interrupted, talked about winning the WWE Championship. And Randy Orton talked about that in the clause that he had in the contract that Cody Rhodes cannot get a rematch. We'll get back to Cody Rhodes in a second. Randy Orton came out. The Miz came out, and that began what we saw throughout the night. The theme of this night was the qualifying matches for Saturday night's main event to determine the new number one contender for Drew McIntyre's WWE Championship. So the winners of those qualifying matches were Randy Orton, Trick Williams, Damian Priest, and Sami Zayn. So these four will meet up in a fatal four-way match at Saturday night's main event next Saturday to determine the new number one contender for Drew McIntyre's WWE Championship. So they won their respective matches. Randy Orton beat The Miz. Trick Williams beat Sami Zayn beat Ilya Dragunov. Trick Williams won his match. I believe he beat I'm trying to remember who he beat. I'm trying to remember who Trick Williams beat. It'll come to me. But Damian Priest won his match. So Sami Zayn defeated Ilya Dragunov. This was interesting. This was cool. Carmelo Hayes defended his U.S. Open challenge in a really good match against Leon Slater. Leon Slater from TNA showed up and wrestled Carmelo Hayes for the U.S. Championship. They had a very good match. And look, Leon Slater is probably WWE bound pretty soon, so wouldn't surprise me at all. But he continues to put up a really good showing on WWE television. Damian Priest beat Solo Sikoa. Like I said before, Sami Zayn defeated Dragunov in the main event to earn his spot. Trick Williams defeated Matt Cardona. That's who he beat. He beat Matt Cardona, a.k.a. Zack Ryder. So that's the fatal four-way for the championship or for the number one contendership for Drew McIntyre's WWE title. We also had Cody Rhodes cutting a promo, and he officially said that he will be the first entrant in the 2026 Royal Rumble. So Cody Rhodes is back in the Royal Rumble. He's not getting it, like I said before, he's not getting his rematch with Drew McIntyre. So he is in the Royal Rumble. So that certainly adds some more intrigue to the Rumble, more star power to the Rumble, and certainly, like I said, more intrigue. We don't really now it's again starts to add more uncertainty. I think a lot of us kind of figure it's going to be Braun Breaker. I'm picking Braun Breaker to win the Royal Rumble, but with Cody in, certainly adds the possibility of him winning. And we've seen reports and stuff about what's going to be the WrestleMania main event. Will it be Cody versus Drew? Will it be Cody, Drew, and Jacob Fatu? We'll have to find out. And it looks like Drew is going to hold that belt for at least a little bit. It looks like Drew's going to hold that belt all the way to WrestleMania. So that's what it looks like, which is very surprising to me. I didn't think Drew would hold that belt to WrestleMania, but it looks like he will. Cody Rhodes versus Jacob Fatu was announced for Saturday night's main event next Saturday. So that should be interesting. But it looks like they're going to continue that story. I mean, I'm happy for Drew that he gets to hold the championship for a little bit. I didn't think he would be a champion for that long, but I'm happy for him that he gets to hold it for a little bit. But it'll be interesting to see what the WrestleMania main event is going to be. It'll be interesting to see what the main event of WrestleMania is going to be. So, and obviously we still have to see what CM Punk's going to do with the World Heavyweight Championship. What's Roman Reigns going to do? Because you got to figure Roman Reigns is going to have they're going to have big plans for Roman. So, but we'll see. So SmackDown, though, was a decent show, but obviously it's building up towards Saturday night's main event into the Rumble. Jordan Grace, we saw a segment with her, and my hat is a little funny. I don't know. I got this hat at the MLB shop in New York City, so actually I like this hat a lot. But Jordan Grace had another segment with Jay Cargill. I really like that. I really like seeing Jay Cargill and Jordan Grace face off and have a feud, at least right now. I assume their match will be, I want to say it's going to be at the Rumble, because the Rumble certainly needs matches right now, aside from the two Rumble matches themselves. But I would like to see that match of the Rumble. I think those two could have a really good Haas power match between those two. So I think they can have a fun match in them. So we'll see. But I like seeing Jordan Grace and Jade Cargill having a feud for the title. The Royal Rumble winner, I think for the women's side, it looks to be Liv Morgan. I would assume. I think it's going to be Liv Morgan, and I think Braun Breaker for the men's side. But a decent SmackDown show tonight. It's very interesting how SmackDown looks like to me right now with 3 hours. I still don't like the fact that it's 3 hours. The talent, though, coming in. There's talent. There's depth now on the roster on SmackDown. There's talent now. There's Trick. There's Cardona. There's Jordan Grace. There's, Randy Orton's now back. There's Ilya Dragunov. Sami Zayn's now back wrestling now. So there's actual, Drew being champion. I think that adds more new things. Cody now can kind of refresh things a bit. You still have the Charlotte Alexa Bliss tag team going on. Obviously, Lash and Nia Jax as well are in there too as well. Like I said, Jade and Jordan Grace, Chelsea Green is the United States champion. So you're seeing some depth, and you're seeing some, and you're seeing Carmelo Hayes and his U.S. Open challenge, him being the United States champion. So you're seeing talent now emerge on SmackDown. You're seeing the roster now start to kind of get in there on SmackDown. You're seeing the talent now start to be added on to SmackDown where they can do a 3-hour show. Again, I'm not a fan of a 3-hour show, but the talent is there. They're now adding talent, and they're adding some quality now to a show on SmackDown that's been very, very lacking for the course of the last year and a year and a half. And they needed it. The last year and a half, even 2 years. But SmackDown really needed this. SmackDown, especially since Raw's been the better show for a while now, SmackDown really needed this. So they've needed this influx of talent, and I think they'll continue to get this influx of talent. So, but SmackDown I thought was a decent show, and I think it's starting to get a little bit better week in and week out. So that's good to see. That's going to do it today for Mazza on Sports. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening. I greatly appreciate it. We'll be back on Monday to talk about the division rounds of the playoffs and preview the championship weekends. And we'll talk Monday Night Raw and any sort of baseball activity, other baseball offseason stuff coming around. I know the John Harbaugh. I do want to talk about the Ravens end of the season presser. I haven't talked about that yet. They're under their presser with Steve Bisciotti and Eric DeCosta on Tuesday. I do want to talk about that. So we'll talk about that on Monday or Tuesday, but I definitely will talk about that. Their presser. I'm also going to think that the Harbaugh Giants thing will be official. There seems to be like he's going to be the head coach of the Giants, but they're still working things out in the contract. And Harbaugh there's been report, Tom Pelissero's like, well, Harbaugh's still keeping his options open, for other teams. But honestly, that seems to be more like a tactic thing. I think Harbaugh is still going to be the coach. They're still trying to work things out. So I assume over the weekend or so, Harbaugh will officially be the head coach of the Giants. So we'll talk about that, of course, on Monday, whether, if he is officially announced the head coach. I mean, all roads lead to him being the head coach of the Giants. He will be the head coach of the Giants. I don't think anything is going to, some snafu is going to go around where he's not going to be the coach. I think he's going to be the coach of the Giants. So, but on Monday, we'll talk about the division round, preview the championship game, talk about Monday Night Raw, and I'll talk about the Ravens end of Ravens presser with Steve Bisciotti and Eric DeCosta, because that was a very notable presser, and I want to talk about some things that I heard from Bisciotti that I want to talk about. So, like I said, that'll be it for today's edition of MazzaOnSports. Thank you guys so much. Have yourselves a great night, and take care.